Okay, so this video is basically aimed at telling you a little bit about the new lenkrad core. So we're going to create a blog application, pure PHP or almost pure PHP, with a starter package that creates a nice project, so we don't have to spend time with styling and stuff like that. We're going to use this to kind of like explain how convenient it is to work with lenkrad, but we're basically going to introduce all the important topics through it. So how to create models, how to create controllers, how to create views, and how does this all interact together. So the actual question of what is lenkrad, you can see I've got this little to-do list here that I want to walk through. The actual idea of lenkrad is to simplify the process, right? So to really speed up your production time. And we use a couple of really modern technologies to do that. So, talking about the prerequisites here. So you need PHP8.1. You can run this in a Docker container or on your system itself. However you want to do this, but you need PHP8.1 and Composer above 2 to actually make this happen. The reason why is, so a lot of the frameworks out there on the market, they have to worry about backward compatibility. That's why how you write code is not really that convenient sometimes. That's why the performance isn't at a peak level. We want to use basically state-of-the-art technology in order to achieve what we want to achieve. So that's what you need, and how that will help us to basically simplify our lives is exactly what we're going to jump into. It follows practices that you will be familiar when you come from different frameworks, so it doesn't feel too foreign. A lot of the principles will kind of like seem like, yeah, it makes sense, right? You know that, like, either coming from other PHP frameworks or even Ruby on Rails or different kinds of complete ecosystems. Now let's jump into it. So the first thing, so we kind of answered this question. So lenkrad is an all-purpose framework. So if you develop either SSR applications or pure backend APIs, that would be something you can use. Prerequisites we also kind of like marked up. Okay, let's go to the installation. So I'm going to go again and not directly install it, but use a starter project that here sets up a little bit of basic styling, and we're actually going to look into this a little bit closer when we're done with this. So let's do the following. And so I'm on a Windows machine at the moment. I'm just going to go to Documents and open up a PowerShell here and kind of run this command. And I'm going to call this block project for now. Simply run this. Okay, as you can see, it's really fast. Like it's very little dependencies. It doesn't have any kind of build script that's running afterwards and so on. Like it's really fast. In theory, you can already run it from here. Let's quickly try this out. So PHP, we need to go in there first. What do we call it? Blog project. Yep. PHP start. It's already up and running. So this is localhost 8080. And here we are, right? This is already it. We could explore this now a little bit from here, but let's open this up in a project so we can kind of compare it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close this again and switch over to this view, and then go here and say open this in PHP Storm. We're not here, we are in users documents. Where did I have it? Yeah, documents, log project. There we go. All right. Here we are. Yep, that's fine. And we kind of like ignore all of this for now. Then kind of help us a little bit with seeing what's going on here. Okay. So the only thing I still need to do is, you don't see that now because it's on the other screen, but I'm going to close the server from the side of PowerShell and start it here. Right, that was wrong. It's called start. Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so here we are, and we're going to explore basically from here. So let's maybe start with exploring the setup a little bit, right? So as you can see, I've got this already connected to database, right? This is because it ships with a SQLite adapter. So at runtime, this database was already connected, and since it doesn't need any kind of authentication and so on, like this simply works out of the box. Now, for the purposes of what we're doing today, I will leave it as a SQLite adapter. As you can see, it's kind of recommended to use the legacy DB adapter, which is kind of a wrapper around the neoan 3 DB adapter, which supports MySQL and MariaDB and so on. But I don't want to deal with databases. As a matter of fact, I want to utilize the power of my PHP Storm and simply want to click on this. Oh, and it does this already. Okay. I was kind of hoping it would do this already, but no. Okay, let's start here. So this is an env file. We can actually ignore this for now. But for deployment reasons, let's quickly look into this. So as you can see, we've got this config folder over here. If you go into setup, you will notice that there's a bunch of stuff that kind of wants to be set. See, this is just our database location. This is the SQL adapter. This is the adapter we're currently using. And we can more or less, none of this is actually critical from a security standpoint, with the exception of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in app and create a file called env.env, and say, hey, we kind of want this thing here to exist outside of our Git, right? And since you will see this anyway, I can name this whatever I want. Maybe not. Make this like that. Okay, right? And if I reload this now, you will see that I have this little check mark over here. And that's all I want to know for now, right? Then database is already connected. Then here we want to migrate the existing model, right? Before we get, so as you can see, I've got a existing model here. This is a user model. We can look at this in detail, but what we're going to do instead is we're going to create our own model and walk through it at that point. So here I'm just going to say I want to migrate this. I'm going to follow exactly this command here. Say, okay, let's do that. You can see this is what basically happened. Let's see if PHP Storm is now smart enough to get this. Whoops. See, now it understands this is an actual data source. And I'm going to click OK. At this point, I should have it in here. Two tables. One of them is the user table. And those are the columns I have. All right, let's actually try this out. So if I were to open this right now, you would see it's an empty table. Now, if we scroll down here, we're going to ignore the routes part here and register our first user. So I'm going to call this neoan and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. My local database, so who cares? Okay, and you can see it says registration successful. And let's see if that actually works. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Boom. And you can see now it basically worked. If I were to refresh this here, you can see that I have a user now with a hashed password, and got my timestamps here, created that, updated that, and so on. Okay, so far so good. As you can see, this delivers a token. You can set this later. We might want to look at this a little bit superficially, but at the moment, this works with both a session and a JWT token, as this starter does not really know whether or not you want to build an API or a server-side rendered solution. So we are going to leave it that way because for our purposes, that's just fine. Let's check if we use this token, what's happening. And here you can see your token was accepted. This is the user ID that was read, and this is the scope. How that works is something we're going to look into. Also, for now, we just want to make sure that this works, so we can actually try this out in the. See, now we can log out. Let's go there. Right. Actually, let's stay logged in for now. That'll be fine. Let's go back to setup and look at the routes. Now, the way that here it's basically not telling us what it's going. Yeah, we'll translate to. Do you see this? So this is how you would actually use the core if you wanted to write a route. In this starter package, what they kind of did is to say, okay, let's look at the web routes, right? So we're currently at setup. So it's simply an array, right? Where you can say, okay, this is the route, right? /setup. Since it's a web route, it's always get. And then it has the view. As you can see, home also has a view, but you can chain things. So this actually uses the setup class. Let's look into that. Okay, so this is a simple controller. It implements routable, and it has an invocable function. See that? So it can be called. We're more or less checking here for, this is what it has, right? It has env, has adapter, and so on. See what's happening here? So this is what gives us the check marks, right? It's checking for certain things, and see, making a raw query to see if the database is connected, and so on. Right, this is basically all it's doing, and whatever I return here is what the view has, right? So let's just, for example, do this. So here we have our has env, right? This is a property that I can basically read. If we were to go to the setup view now, so I navigate out here, go into view, and go into setup. Okay, it's used in an attribute. Let's actually do this right here and say span. Oops. And here I'm going to say as env. Okay. Now if I go up here, do you see what says present? So after that, I expect something to see. Now it prints 1 for true. Right? So I can basically say, okay, this is how I can read something. Let's make something really weird. And here say, okay, test to view. And go here. And here say test instead. And you can see now it's printed directly here. Right? This is the basic templating is working like that. Now, as you can see in web routes, we don't really need this, right? We can basically directly go here and inherit whatever injections we already have. So we don't need to add anything here. And what we could also do, we can actually do this one. We will now chain it, right? So we're going to now say, hey, this setup needs two classes. So first, the needs session class is executed, which is a middleware, and then the setup is executed. So if I reload the page now, you know, everything is fine. But if I were to log out and then go back to setup, you would see it doesn't work. It kicks me back to login, right? So now it's a restricted route because it needs an authenticated session in order to actually let me there. So if I remove it again and then click on setup, I'm fine and can go back to setup. All right, this is basically what is happening with the routes. Now, as mentioned here, this is not really what's happening under the hood. So there's this bootstrap file that kind of like puts all the settings together. As you can see, it sets, you know, template path and, you know, takes care of all the setup that is necessary for this particular setup. So just to make you understand of what's really happening, let's call route here and create a actual, like how the core would do it, right? And say, okay, we want to have a get to let's say my route, and actually it doesn't need any kind of classes, and then it needs a view path, and that shall be test.html. Now let's quickly create a view. What do we call it? Test. Let's get rid of this. And doesn't matter. We're going to say margin top 300 pixel. Oh, that doesn't work, does it? This is how it works. Then here we're going to do h1 and use a test. Okay. All right. So this is what's actually happening. So if I were now to visit my route, right, I could see that I should have given it a little bit of padding, but here's my test route now, right? So that's what's normally happening. So here I could also do a post and so on, right? And I can also add my classes here. Let's put our need session back in here. See, now I have to log in order to get there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what was it called? My route. Path, I tried this out already. Right, and now I'm back on here. And as you can see with the dot, dot, dot here, I can chain middleware however I want to. Right, so this is a good way for me to kind of like chain certain things. If I need to, we will look into that in our blog. And then just to complete this, so again, we wouldn't need any of this, but I can also directly inject values if I wanted to. If I don't want to have a class, I could, for example, say, hey, the only thing I really need to know here is that the title or the test is test me, right? And if I then were to say this is actually test and reload this, oops, then is this a restricted word or what? Oh, because it does have a class. Interesting. I expected this to work, but need session takes, this only works if I have nothing, I guess. Right? Do I have to do this? Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. And what else can I do? I can basically set the response handler So let's just say I wanted to make this a JSON response, right? I could basically say response this guy class. Actually, I have to kind of like see how this works here. It's just a okay response handler. Is that all it is? Okay. This is a void method. Oh, because then it has no view. Yeah, something's missing here. Expected parameter array. Okay, how about this? And JSON. Is this the right one? Let's see. Permission denied. Okay, that's not it. Then it's not response. It's render. This guy maybe. Yeah. Okay. I would have to look that up. We can. Let's actually do this. Where is it? Quickly make this detour and see. Blah blah blah. Response handling. Oh, response handler. Ah. So this should be it. Was response. Oh, but it needs a controller then. Okay. Okay, let's see. There we go. We need something, right? We need something. Okay, so okay, this is obviously what the session middleware basically passes on. This is basically the auth with a valid user ID, and we set the response to be a JSON. So as you can see, this is what's happening. So we don't want any of this. This was basically just a little bit of trial to see what's going on, and this notation will work just fine for us. And as you can see, there are web routes and API routes, right, that are set. And the difference is that here the last one is always going to be a view, and here the last one is always going to be a method, right? So as you can see, those are the things that we're actually calling. If I go back to setup and look at what's happening here. Let's actually do this. Let's go to the network, and so call this function. See how it says me? So it's calling API auth me. And okay, the API can be omitted here, but then the auth me, this is basically what's happening. It's calling the needs auth. So this is not checking for a session, but for the token. Then it executes the me class, and it's a get method. Let's look at the me class. What does this do? Nothing. It basically just returns what is provided from the auth, see? So in this case, we have a JWT, so we directly receive the JWT, which is in reality probably not a good idea, right? To just pass that on to the client, but it nicely shows us what's happening here, right? So this is basically how our APIs would work. And just to complete that, let's actually also look into how this is even sent. You probably noticed that this site didn't reload, which is a little bit unusual for a pure PHP implementation. So if we were to kind of like see, so try to reach, okay. If if we actually were to jump here and see that this is a regular form element, right? So we're sending this to API auth me. You can see it here with the method get. And then we have this then, which is not a regular native. You can even see my storm says, I don't know what that is. But if you look at authenticated, then you see there's a JavaScript function, right? So what's actually happening is, and by the way, this kind of looks like jQuery, but it isn't. If we actually were to go there, you see that this is just a little wrapper here. What's actually happening here is that every form is kind of like intercepted, right? If we go to the skeleton, which is something we're going to go into too, you will basically see that, okay, this looks for all forms that are rendered and basically says, okay, whenever there's a submit, execute this. And the first thing it does, as you can see, is it prevents the default behavior of actually sending it, and then starts the process of actually converting this to an API call. And so it feels like you're writing just native forms, but in reality, you're sending something to the server in the background, and it comes back, and then there's a then and a catch. So in this, you can basically react to success cases and to failures just by writing it like that. Now, this again has nothing to do with lenkrad core. This is just this particular setup that works like that. So far, so good. What we want to look into now is probably something that will get us on our way of actually building something. So the very first thing we need is to basically create a blog model if we want to have a blog, right? So let's look at our check page here. So we're done with the installation, explore and explain. I think we're good here for now. Let's create the routes. Okay, let's do that first maybe. No, let's actually not do that first. Let's first do, let's create all the stuff that we need. So we need a controller, right? So I'm going to say PHP CLI. So the reason this works, just to be sure, is that there's this simple CLI script here that doesn't do much, right? As you can see, it's basically loading it with a little bit of a different setup than the index, and runs this then as a CLI command. We can write our own CLI commands, by the way. This is just based on the Symfony console, but we're good now, and we're going to say PHP CLI create controller, and then we're going to just go with the PSR namespace. So in our case, it would be, we want to have it an app controller. See, this is how it's named, controller. And in here, I want to have something like blog, and then read blog. Okay. So as you can see, I have, oops, I apparently have a cached issue here. It's the composer cache. I know where this is happening. That's fine. Am I gonna fix this manually quickly? Yeah, okay. Let's ignore that. So this will not really happen to you. Stupid composer cache. Namespace is now, sorry, what are we, app, controller. It's gonna kill me. Actually, let me quickly fix this. I want to quickly fix this. So why are we having this problem? So let's simply do, wait. See, that fixes the issue. Okay. So you can see it fixed itself now. A little bit of a composer cache problem that sometimes happens. So this is all it's doing, right? You remember the me, so it's not much going on now. We want to do this a little bit different and now basically say, okay, there's more we need. We also need an actual blog entry, right? So we're going to do almost the same. Instead of a controller, we're going to say we're going to create a model, and the model is going to be in model right in here. And we're going to directly place it in here because we're not going to have a complicated structure here, and say log entry. Okay, let's see how that looks like. All right, not much going on. Let's kind of change that. So what could the model need? So we need some kind of like, okay, who wrote it, right? This is what we want. So we're going to have a public int user ID. And then we're going to have a what else we need? Title, I guess. We're going to use our timestamps. User use timestamps. By the way, if you're not using PHP Storm, whenever I do stuff like that, it just automates, the use statement, so I don't have to write the full namespace here. So be aware of that a little bit while I type along. Title, and then we need content. Okay. Now, we want, and we need a slug. And that is also going to be a string. Slug. Okay. Now, so far, so good. This looks pretty simple, right? But we kind of like have to create some logic here, or want to create some logic here, so we don't have to worry about it in the business logic, right? So the first thing that we want to do is to say, okay, so a string defaults to certain things. Now, we're using a SQLite database, so we're not really concerned about it, but just so that you've seen it, what we probably want to do here is to create a particular type of something, right? And because in that case, we don't want it to default to whatever the string is of your database adapter. So if you're using MySQL, it would be varchar, right? And our content is probably simply not enough for that. So we want to have a text in here, right? So let's have this text, and then the rest is kind of like, okay, we don't need it to default it to anything or anything. This will be fine. It should be nullable. Everything's okay. It's actually true. It should be nullable. Okay. So far, so good. Here, it's going to be fine. Now, the slug has a couple of other things. The slug should be unique, right? So as you can see, I can simply use those attributes and create my own attributes. Now, in this case, I actually want this to work like an attribute that does a little bit more than that. So I want to add a second attribute that will kind of like work with these kind of slugs when they're incoming. So how can I do this? Well, I can either create my complete own attribute, or I can basically do something else, which we're going to do here just to show you a little bit of functionality, and say, hey, I want to create something that I call transformers. Okay. Now, I want to kind of like, when this gets created, to say transform, and then here it says converter class. See that? I don't have one here. So I'm going to call this hash. Not hash. slug. Slug. Yep. And I don't think it needs to extend anything. Should be fine like that. I think. Let's try it out. And here's say slug. Yep. Class. Okay. And do I need another? No, that's all I need. Okay. And this probably needs to be callable. So I'm going to create the function invoke and the function construct. Now the question is what they receive here. And what we're going to do is actually quite simple. We're going to go to the core and kind of like just backwards engineer this a little bit and say, well, attributes. Is it a model maybe? What does this transform actually do? Okay, so this gives the result of this direction and property. Okay. All right. So, and what is the direction? Is a direction. Okay, understood. So we basically say context, and that is then probably an array. Then we have the direction, which is an enum. Okay. Gonna call direction, and then we have the property name, which we don't really need in our case. So we should be fine. Should be fine. Okay. And yeah, this is void. So what we're going to say is like, okay, if this is incoming, right? Actually, we need the property because we don't know this. We might want to reuse this. We want to basically say if the direction is direction in, right? So when we're in a updating or if we're creating. And so since we could also land in updating, and this could be a little bit dangerous for us. So we're going to say if context property is empty, right? Or actually, it's not even initialized. Yeah. So when we're creating a new blog entry, right? Then we want to take the title, right? Yep, then we want to take the title. So we're going to say context property is, and here we're going to simply say, yeah, so we're going to do a prec replace of the context title. Yeah. Oops. Okay. And we're going to make this pretty simple for now, right? We're probably going to say whatever is not A to Z. Yeah, case insensitive, should be replaced with a dash, right? This is how our slug system works now. Okay. Do we have to return this? Yeah, I should need to return the context, right? Let's look at this again. Oh, we don't know it from here. well, it just returns this whatever we're doing. So yeah. Yeah. Oops. Okay. Okay. So that means from now on, we didn't need the construct after all. From now on, we can basically say, we want to make sure that this is unique and transform it to a slug. Okay, yeah, that's all we need here. And here we need to attach the user automatically. Let's do this manually for now so we don't dive into that too much. The title can be as is, and then we're basically done for now, right? Yeah, I want to do this anyway. Okay, initialize, and then the setter. Can I write a function here? Yes, but I'm going to do this differently. Attach user. I'm going to say build a second transformer, just so we're clean. And I'm going to call attach user. Since those use here we're going to have our function construct, and we're going to simply say, hey, this little fellow works a little bit differently. We're going to use our session. Say if session, oops, I don't know how that came about. Took the wrong one. We want to have this guy. Okay, if session has user ID this is a construct, right? Okay. User ID, then user ID is session get user ID. And this is of course bullshit. To be this. And actually I'm going to set this to null, I think, for now. Yeah. How does it get it now? It's a toString probably. Let's figure that out too. Oh, we can also do that one. Let's say initialize something that does what? Invoke get type. Okay. So the setter returns something. Interesting. Okay, so basically this returns something that's probably a little bit more complicated than I thought. But let's try it out. Return this user ID. Yeah. Different way. What do we have set here? Okay. Yeah, that should do. Let's figure this out while we have it, right? And then here we're going to say attach user. Okay. Let's see what this is doing. Okay, so in theory, right, this should now basically say, okay, so whenever we use this attached user, we want that the logged in user is automatically attached here. We're setting the primary key. We're making sure that the field itself is unique, and we're also transforming the slug here, which we could have used this here too, right? This is, I just wanted to try out this initialize, which is probably going to bite us in the ass, but we'll see. Okay, so the title we can leave as is, so this should kind of like work for us, right? So let's go back to our checklist. So now we need an actual route for that. Right. So we want to do the following things, right? So we need a couple of views, right? Let's basically create a folder here that we call log, and we are going to say, okay, so we want, what do we want? We want a read, right? Yeah. Actually, do container mt5. And then we want to have a card with a width of 50%, and is it like this, or is it, no, like this, almost tilde but not. Okay, now let's do this one here, and our read block does nothing at the moment. Okay, so far so good. And then now we want to create an actual web route here. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to say this is at log, and then it uses a slug. Okay, and the moment this will do nothing but go to log read. I'm on Windows. You should probably be strict about your capitalization if you're not in Windows, by the way, otherwise you're gonna have a problem. Okay, so far so good. Let's try this out, right? So if I were to go here and basically said, okay, so I'm going to blog / my second entry, this is fine. I can see this where it says here. It's a little higher than I expected it to be. Probably shouldn't do this with a container here. Probably should have this here, I guess. Or is this just in general too high? Is this an absolute positioning or something? What am I doing wrong? Something. Okay, I don't for this to go into that now, so I'm going to say margin top is 100 Yeah, something's going on here. See that? Wonder what that is. Ah, it's a JavaScript error. I see. The web path is not correct. It doesn't matter at the moment. We don't need JavaScript for this one. Okay. All right. So what we want to do is actually read the slug first, right? That's probably the first thing that we're going to do. This is our blog entry. Oh, we should actually create this now. So let's check whether or not migrate model into our SQLite setup, and we want to say this is app model log entry. Oh, wait, like this, right? Yeah. Okay, this worked. So it looks like our setup was all right. Yep, and here's our blog entry now. Yeah, looks good. Awesome. Now I'm going to create this manually now, just so we can see what's going on before we write our blog. Or actually, let's write our blog first. So in our, let's basically close a couple of those things. So we don't need this anymore. Don't need any of that. We're good with this. Read blog, is that our, yeah. So here, right, this is basically, let's close this one too. This is basically the connection that we're kind of like interested in right now. So this is what we're looking at. And this is basically what gives us this, which means that our name would work, right? So if I were to put a name here, we could probably see, are we not using this? Read blog in our web routes, we are not. We should use this. We want to have the read blog class in here. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So we can actually give on information here. Now, what do we want to find here, right? So let's first see what we can actually do here. So from provided, I know that there's going to be something called slug. And all right, yep, slug. And I want to kind of fetch this. And I'm going to do this from the request. This one, get parameters, right? So I'm going to pull out of the request. I'm going to get the parameters. And so I know it's called slug because in our web routes, see, we have this colon notation here. So this is something we should be able to get. And let's now quickly get this here and see if that's true. Oh, it says name. Yeah, we need to call this slug now. Boom. And as you can see, I can now read what's here in the request, right? And we're going to make use of that and say, okay, so what do we want with this? So first of all, I'm getting now all the parameters and kind of like get this out of there. This is not really necessary. I can basically also say slug is request get parameter slug and say I just want to have the specific one in the first place. Then I don't need to get all the parameters. I'm fine with this. And what I also want to do is I want to get our log entries, and say retrieve 1, and the condition is slug is slug. Oops. Okay. Actually, I also want in our case to say deleted null, just in case it used to exist but doesn't exist anymore because it got soft deleted. Because see, we said we're going to use the stamps and there's a deleted at time. So in theory, I could soft delete things. Okay, so this should be our blog, right? Now let's kind of like try and see what's happening if I do this, right? If I basically give this the blog, so this shouldn't exist, or it actually doesn't exist, right? So this is simply empty now. To make a little bit of a better view of this, let's actually see what it returns, right? And as you can see, or oops, do this. It says null up here, right? So since we don't have this, this is empty. So if that's the case, which means we're on a link where we're not supposed to, let's do that and say, hey, if not blog, the user is not supposed to be here. So let's create a new not found with the request URI being actually what we're going to do here is to say blog slug. Okay. Now let's see what happens. I'm going to reload this. Boom. And I'm on a 404 page, right? Just the default 404. It's something we haven't talked about yet. But we can, of course, change that and could actually read this. Apparently, the setup does make use of that and tell you what page is not found and so on. So, and in the other case, we want to simply return blog. Blog, which is then going to bitch at me here and say, hey, this is actually a blog entry you're returning. Okay, that's all we need to do. So this is our complete read blog thing here, right? Let's try it out. Let's try it out and say, hey, let's go into the database. Let's quickly create this here by hand. This little plus thing here. So the ID we're going to leave free. This is us. Slug is, what is it called? My second entry. Title. Second entry. Content is test. Okay. All right. Transformer slug does not implement transformation. So now our bold movements is something that's going to implement. What do you need? Transformation. Okay. Boom. There we go. Okay. And apparently we're just reading the slug here, but let's kind of fix this, right? So now we know, all right, there is something that has a background accent, let's say, and also a padding of 3, and there's an H1 in there with the title, right? And that's good for us. Actually, we're missing one of those. Okay, and then we have another thing with a P3, and this is where we're going to have the content. All right, boom. Okay, so far so good. So this apparently does not work. Let's make this primary. No, just primary. I know what the problem is. That's why I don't get this. I quickly need to make a detour here and kind of like tell you about the compile stuff, which means that we kind of like want to make use of this glass framework. And I'm going to say, no, not yarn. Yeah, yarn SCSS. Quickly compile the whole thing. That's stuff you can explore on your own, but if you quickly go to setup and work with it and then to styling, you'll kind of see like what this is based on, right? And there's an explanation for everything. That kind of like points you to those kind of here. This is kind of like the styling that is used and so on, like partly based on, right? All that stuff. Okay. So this compiled now. Let's go back. Oops, no, where are we now? Where did we just come from? Oh yeah. See, now it looks like that. Ooh, which is horrible. Let's make that first of all teal. Also reduce this huge space here. Better. Okay, so far so good. Now let's start to kind of like write this, right? Yeah. So what we're going to do is to create a write blog entry, right? So let's create another view here and call this write. Now this is going to behave very differently. We're going to create one of those. Should finally work, I suppose. And then we need a form, right? So actually, let's start with something like that. Write a blog entry. Right. Okay. Okay. So we don't have that endpoint yet. So let's quickly check this out. So what do we need? We need probably a regular input. Right. So since I don't know exactly how this is going to behave, let's check this out. Label. Why does this? For, and we're going to say title. It's title. You know what? I'm going to do the placeholders. Input, type text is correct. Name is title. We need to set the name attribute in this case, and placeholder is title. Let's see how that looks like. We don't know it yet because we need to create the route. Let's do that. So let's go into our web routes and say write definitely needs a session, and it needs located at blog write HTML. Okay. Right. Here we are. Yeah, that's okay. But this doesn't have a width. This was why that is useless, but that's fine. We want this. Actually going to make this a little bit more interesting. And say you shall be here. And then we're going to have text area. Name, content, and the placeholder content. Okay. And then we want to have a button. Why does this do like that? Button with save, type is submit, and class is button. All right, let's see how that looks like. That's kind of what I expected. So let's give the form a little bit of behavior here and say it's grid. Then it behaves like that. And then we're gonna say this has a margin y of 3, and so does this, and more even. Okay, and now the save button is something I'm going to place a little bit different. Place x end. Yeah. Okay, and here I'm probably going to say yeah, px maybe, huh? Yeah, I think that'll do. Okay, let's maybe capitalize the T, and then we should be okay. Okay, so far so good. Now let's kind of like see where this is going. So our action is something that we don't have yet. So we're going to say this is API. And then just blog. Yeah, that's all we want for now. Right? And then we're going to say then read. Okay. So we don't have API blog. Should I call this a new entry? Yeah, I want to call this new entry. This is fine. All right, so what do we need? We first need a create blog, right? So in our controllers, we have at the moment blog and read blog. So let's start with that. So we're going to say PHP CLI create controller, say create blog. I need, of course, the full add controller blog. Okay, so far so good. And then I need an API route that actually is a post to blog. So let's go here and say, hey, we have a new blog coming in. Now this needs auth, right? So we need a token in this case. And then we want to go to what's it called? Create blog, and we want this to be a post method. Okay, let's make this a little prettier and place this. So again, this is just moving to the use, so I can read it better. Okay, so far so good. So if the authentication goes through, then we're going to go here, right? So let's go there and say create blog. What are you doing here? Not much. So we now can kind of know that the naming is all correct. So let's basically see what's happening here. So I want to have, in that case, I want to have a new blog entry. Okay, and I can of course do it like this and say, okay, I've got my blog entry, and then I've got my blog user ID, content, whatever I want to fill. So I don't really want to do this, since I can remember the request that kind of had the I can just get the input Those are all the inputs I get. And since this is automatically going to take care of just the stuff that I actually have, so in that case, title, content, and whatever else I would say cannot be put in here. It's absolutely safe to say, hey, just drop this in here. Just drop this in here and everything will be fine. And for now, I'm going to return the block. Okay, so we see what's going on. And I have to tell this that we're returning a blog entry. The reason why I have to do this is that later on in the process, it can actually translate this accordingly to JSON. So this is what I'm going to do. And in our write, what we're going to do in our then for now is to, actually that's fine. Let's leave it here. Script, and we're going to say function read log. Now the only thing I'm going to do is to console log this. Okay, so we see what's happening. Now let's refresh this page and go to our network and simply try it out for now. Okay, so my log entry some content. Oh, and we have 404. Why? Oh, because it's get. This is the default behavior. Kind of important to specify that one, otherwise we won't get far. All right, first I need to refresh again. Log entry, blah, blah, go. Oops, go. Okay, now I get a 200 back, so let's see what we're getting back. So as you can see, I get my title and the content and then headers from the authorization. Okay, so this is currently basically how it's dealing with things. Now, as you can see, this does not seem to be written to the database. And that's exactly what we're going to try to kind of like do now and say, okay, let's go to our create blog and say, well, let's try this out now and see if our transformers work accordingly. So I'm going to say store, right? And actually, I can even write this, since this is going to return it again. I'm going to write it like that and get rid of this. All right, now let's see. Bum. Oh, kind of expected something else now. Let's see where the culprit is. Great blog. So interestingly, this doesn't seem to have done anything, huh? Yeah. So one of our transformers is apparently not working, but I'm kind of surprised that it doesn't throw any kind of issue. So something that we wrote kind of like I'm just curious. Why this wouldn't do anything. Let's figure it out. For now, simply. do this. Okay. And here, then simply restore again. Let's see what's happening. Nothing. This works like a charm, but doesn't do anything. Now that's a bummer. Yeah, this is a routing issue. Where are we shooting this to? API blog. Post to blog. Okay. Okay. What does this do? Okay, this is fine. This should just handle it through. Am I going crazy? API blog. Oh, because I'm looking at the payload. I see the problem. Promise I'm an idiot. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, here we can see our problem now. Let's remove this and say, okay, title, there's no title in the slug. There isn't, because this is title. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now look at that. Now it works. Yeah, I was looking at the payload, so what we send over rather than what we receive, which is kind of like pretty stupid. So in our console, we should now have basically our blog logged, which we do. And since we got rid of our attached user, let's try this out too. Now this will hit the unique one, my blog N323. Fatal error. Okay, and I thought so. This is where we're going a little bit too crazy. So I'm going to say we're going to use the regular transform and say, okay, forget all of this. Let's change this to a invoke. And we know that we're getting context here. The direction. And what else do we get? The property name. Property. Okay, then we can basically say, and then we already know it needs to implement transformation. Okay. Okay. We know that. We know that, and must be compatible. Yeah, you know what? Let's do this automatically. Yep. Okay. And then basically do this one and say, if, so what do we need to know? If, nope, not input output. If direction is in and okay, and oh yes, input output property is input output property, and then we can throw this away. And then of course we're gonna say input output property is the user ID. Okay. Let's try this out. What does it say now? Return value must be of type array. Oh yeah, we definitely need to return this stuff. Boom. Okay. Cool. That works. As we can see that we could have actually left our slug. See, we cut out the 23. So I think it's fine for us to say, let's include numbers in there. That's fine. Okay. And the user ID is 1. Okay, so now this worked. Basically, this whole thing, where is it? Does all of this automatically. That's great. Okay. Sorry about that. But sometimes you have to kind of like do a little bit of trial and error. Okay, so now we can basically write blog entries. So we can also read blog entries. So now we know that something like, let's make something simple. Actually call this simple. And say first entry markdown. Okay. Let's save this. And in our then, we kind of forgot this. So here, we basically now want to say, hey, window location href is blog.slug. Almost right. Because we also need to say, what is that? That's not complicated. We're going to simply say, this is going to be slash blog slash. Okay. And that should do. Okay. All right, so now if it's successful, then this should happen. I'm going to not try this out, but instead do this manually and say blog simple. Okay. And as you can see, I can read this here. Now, I wanted to do markdown, right? So I kind of like prepared, okay, we could forget all of that kind of stuff. Kind of prepared this thing here where I said, okay, this is cool. This is from the PHP League. They're very good when it comes to maintaining. It's a small team and so on. It's pretty cool. Let's kind of like do this and say, yep, we're going to use that one. So let's go here and say, hey, please add this. All right. A couple of stuff we need here. And then in our read blog, where is it? In our read blog, let's kind of like work with this a little bit different, right? So if there's no block, then okay, throw it here. Else, let's do this a little bit differently and say, hey, we want to have just the title. No, actually, I'm just going to say it's easy and say blog and return the blog and convert it. And here I'm going to say, oh, I'll have to actually use it. So I just need to use this one. And this one. All right, this should be simple. And kind of this one. Where that'll be blog content. I'm gonna get rid of that one. And this should already be it. Okay, and then our read, we basically now have our blog title, and here we have our converted. Okay, now let's check this out. Oops, blog entry as array. Ah, yeah. Right. Not sure why I did this. Of course, content like that. Boom. Okay. And now I can basically write markdown in when I write, and this is then my blog. Okay. So far, so good. Now let's kind of like just make this a little bit watertight. We would probably create an edit probably normally, but since this is taking longer than I expected, let's just not do that for now and instead go and do something to basically get this to actually work with this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add into the config in the bootstrap file. Yeah, this is where I'm going to do it. So where do we do our database? Okay, here the database stuff gets connected. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to write to the store here and say set log entries. And what I want to do here is to say log entry retrieve where delete date. Is it no deleted at is no. Okay. And in my skeleton, oh, what are we packing in here? The inject. Oh, this is done in setup. Where's my skeleton? Here. I'm gonna say entries is store dynamic, and what did I call this now? Log entries. Actually, let's do ourselves a favor. Call this just log entries, and this is not set. This is right. Yeah. Log entries. Okay. Just see if everything's still working. Yeah, this is fine. Okay, why am I doing this? Because now I can actually go into the skeleton. This is system skeleton. And kind of say with this drop down here, I'm going to change this completely and say, hey, this is blog. And this here is n4, and I'm going to say blog entries as entry, and do that one here, and get rid of all of those. And the href is going to be /log/ and then I'm going to say entry.slug, and here so entry dot. All right, I'm going to load this. Oops. All right, this seems not to work. Log entries, did I not? So it has one for some reason. Okay, blog entries. Oh, this is just called entries. This is just called entries for me. Okay. Fair enough. Nope. Okay, it's the variable name blog entries, and we're writing blog entries here. And this is a collection. I don't know if it can do that. At which point this rendering happens. Now this should be fine, right? Well, let's be sure. And say to array. Just flatten it down. Ah, there we go. Okay. Okay, so the styling here is a little bit off. Why is that? Why is that so? That's the drop down link. Let's quickly see in our SCSS what's happening here. Anyway, I guess. Drop down. Any kind of width here. Any kind of width, you see, this is it. What else do we have? No, this just drop down link. Okay, what gives us this width? What gives us this width? Here, 80%. Where's this? Oh, in here. Yeah, let's just get rid of that. And CSS. Should be fine, right? Yeah, I think that we're good. Okay, now let's kind of like clean the database one more time. So I'm just going to do this very simple and oops. And kind of say truncate. Where do I do that? Truncate here. Yep. So now it's all empty. Okay. Right. So here I probably say, hey, this whole shebang here is n if entries length. All right. Ooh. That's probably the wrong level here. This should be here. Okay. Awesome. Nothing here yet. And then instead of setup, I want to say, hey, do me a favor and do this to right. Right, and it's then not setup, but right. Awesome. Okay. All right. And then last thing is where it says your logo. We probably want to say blog. Okay. Yeah. That's basically already it. And this I only want to see when I'm what's the condition here? Hold on a second. If is logged in, yep. We want to do this one and say, hey, you, this takes it away from the parent. I hope that works. Should only be there if I'm logged in. Let's log out and see. Then this login shows up. This is so weird. Because they all have the same parent. That's not good. Okay. Yeah, that's not an issue, right? If I do it like this. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Now let's play it through and say, all right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Bomb. Cool. Let's write a blog. Awesome. Actual first blog. I have a website. Has name changes. Here be text. Boom. And there we go. Right? Probably want to actually not make this so small, but you get the idea. You get the idea. And now, oh, but this doesn't work now, huh? But this does work now. The only thing we really need to do in our skeleton to fix this issue is that it should have been like that anyway. We want to have deep routes. Right? Yeah, exactly. Now everything works just fine. Okay. That may be our reach. Probably be full-fledged, right? Yeah. Don't need any of this. We're in a container already. That should be fine. Okay. Awesome sauce. So yeah, that's basically it. The last thing that we kind of want to do at the very end of this is maybe secure the route. So what I'm going to do, just for security purposes, is to comment this one out. So nobody can register at the moment. And everything should be still up and running and it's fine. And now you can spend time on designing it the way you want to design it. But it is all up and running. Yeah. So that was a little bit of a different beast than I expected, since I probably need some more coffee before I, you know, go into writing transformers and stuff like that. But as you can see, the principle of how migrations work and so on is pretty straightforward. Mm. The routing should be very intuitive. We basically talked about all different kinds of needs, and let's quickly walk through it one more time from a different perspective now. And this will also solve as a kind of like a going back to see okay, what's actually happening, right? So let me switch over here for one more time, and then actually make this smaller and go away a little bit, and kind of like close all tabs. And let's start by looking at our logic here, right? So starting from the route, sorry, wrong one. So first of all, we want to have a place where we can write our blog, right? This is basically what's happening here. It will require a session to visit it, and this is basically all that we're doing. We don't need a class here. See how we're never going to post against this, so it's fine not to have any kind of class here other than our session. And on the left, we can see this is what we see here, right? Is a pure blog write HTML, a view that we kind of like wrote in this blog sequence. Now, the next thing that we want is to basically, and I have to jump over here to the API routes to say, okay, I can create a new blog, right? So there's a post command that I can shoot against blog, and that of course requires authentication, and then we're going to use the create blog. Okay, let's look into this. So this is basically creating a new blog entry depending on the inputs from the request, right? That's all we're doing. We're going to try to basically store this to the database. If not, then we're going to return the error. Unfortunately, it happened to us a couple of times. And then we're going to return the blog with all of its content. That's basically it. Let's look at our blog entry. So we have used a couple of things that are not just off the shelf, right? So this primary key is something we don't really need to worry about. This whole section here is how it comes. The only thing I can do is to basically say, well, this is not an int, and this is not called ID or whatever. This will work with different, actually at the moment it doesn't, because our adapter doesn't work with UUIDs, but if you want to use different adapters, then you could have this whatever you want. Then here, okay, here we had a little bit of a difference. So we're transforming the user ID. This is really not ideal how we solve this, but it doesn't matter at this point. So spare us in the business logic, right? So don't forget what we could have done here is to basically say, okay, I could kind of like could have done it like that, and then basically retrieve the user model myself, right? And said, okay, user ID is from the provided, either from here, right? I know that I have auth in here. Actually, let's remind ourselves quickly of the me controller. Right, this is what it returns. So basically, you would have something like auth in here, which in turn then has a payload, and so you know, has the user ID, right? This is basically what the need session passes on to me. So I could have done that, right? And basically said, okay, I'm going to get this from the provided, but it's fine to say, hey, I want this to work either way, right? Because maybe I'm an admin and I one day want to kind of like edit a blog entry of another author, or for whatever reason, I just kind of want to say like, okay, the blog entry itself, right, is encapsulated. So it's, if there's a session and the, right, let's look at it one more time, what we're doing here in our, where are transformers here, right? So we're saying, okay, so if it's incoming, right, which means that we're not reading, we're writing to the model, and it's not set, right? So we would allow, basically would allow a setting here in when we create it. And there is a user, which of course in our case will always be true because we wouldn't be able to either come to create a blog, but just for security purposes, right? Then we're going to set property to this user ID, right? That's basically what's happening. So what we're saying here is, hey, if you get created, attach this user ID to the property user ID. That's all that's happening. Okay, now down here is unique. That's an onboard thing. So we're just going to do this for the database, and then we do the same thing and say, hey, you remember when we use the title to basically transform the title into a slug. And which basically also means, this is probably interesting, we didn't create a slug now that is forthgoing and checks against anything. So this would basically mean that since this is a unique field, if then, and the slug would be created the same, if I have the same title, the entry would fail, right? So you would actually have to have a .then in your form to kind of like account for that. But I don't think it's going to happen if you're writing a blog yourself. But just, you know, to basically get you to the point to understand that there are a couple of things that still would need to be taken care of in order to make this a professional application. Okay, and then the title, okay, that's fine. And then this basically is also fine, right? This is type, and text is something that we just added in case you want to switch to a different adapter. You don't want to use a SQLite database. But honestly, for something like a blog, I think that what you should do instead is focus on, if you want to further develop this, on creating a cached result, right? Because if the read blog, we're going to get to that in a second. Anyway, the timestamps is just a trait. Let's actually look at this, right? So what does this do? We could have looked how that works here. Right? So this is a type datetime, right? It actually has a default, and it initializes a new date helper. And we could have looked at this guy to see what this is actually doing. Well, wasn't that wrong? See, it's doing a toString. Right, so it's constructing something, and then toString is what's basically called at the end in order to write it into this field. Okay. Okay, here, same thing, right? And well, this is just a type datetime. So yeah, it's very, very simple trait to use the timestamps, and that's all we did. So this is our complete model logic, basically. And if we compare this to the model user, we'll see it's not that different, right? So, okay, here they also use a transform to hash the password. Okay, pretty simple. And then timestamps. And then what we have here is that the user has its own login functionality. So this is kind of interesting, right? As you can see, let's look at the login. We can probably see that this is something that is used, right? So, okay, here it's very strict, right? Very strict. And then here you can see it. So to see user login, you can use then the method statically directly on the user object. And basically, I suppose it returns itself. Yeah, see? So in the success case, this returns a user instance, right? Very, very clean. Okay, but we're getting off the track here a little bit. So this is our model. And then when we created this, we have our read blog, right? So we will go here. So we redirect it from a routing perspective. Let's go to the web routes and say blog slug. So here we are using this colon, and then basically say, okay, get this to read block. I don't need a session here, it's public. What does this do? First, I'm getting the slug with a parameter. Then I'm trying to read, to retrieve one, right? So the blog entry with the corresponding slug, but only if it's not deleted. And if that's not the case, then I'm going to throw a 404. And if it's the case, I'm going to convert. So since this conversion is always going to happen outside of the database, right? So which makes sense actually. But what I would probably do here in the long run is to say, hey, let's cache this process, right? Why is this necessary to do whenever we somebody visits this? This is basically going to be a static page, right? If you think about it like this, if we go there, like this will never change again unless I update it or something. But I mean, I could basically write the result of this whole HTML into cache and then just deliver that on this route and be good with it. We could write simple logic for that. As a matter of fact, we can quickly do this. Why not, right? Let's not get into this. Otherwise, we're going to extend this video even longer. Okay, and that's basically all there is to know, right? So we're going to pass the basically block and convert it out to our view. Our view would then be blog read. And here you can see, okay, there's a blog title. I could probably do something like created at something like this, right? I mean, the format's going to be lousy now. Probably want to change that to some kind of form, but I mean, for now, this works. Right? I could, or display or attach the author or whatever the hell. And this is the converted result, right? That took our markdown and kind of like did this to it. And yeah, that's basically all you need to know about how to get started. Yeah, that's I hope you kind of liked it. I'm sorry, I know I went down a bunch of rabbit holes, but I mean, this is just how it is sometimes when you're coding live. Then you kind of like find yourself coding away. But I hope you enjoyed. I hope you can try it out and have some fun. And I see you the next time.